Okay, so thank you all for coming in and being interested in the topic of diversity and inclusion. We have approximately an hour to get through, and so, I have to tell you, I thought about what do I include in an hour? There's so much to talk about with regard to diversity and inclusion. So I think I kind of scaled it down to be able to give you some good nuggets to be able to take back with you. How many of you actually practice diversity and inclusion in your organizations or are responsible for D&I in your organizations? Couple? I see some, maybe I am, maybe I'm not sure, kind of. So we're going to talk about that. Diversity and inclusion, it's not an easy thing. It's not one of those tangible things that you can go through and say, hey, you know what, I hit this marker of, meeting X amount of dollars within a certain period of time. So we're going to talk about how can you begin to preface a strong business case for your organizations to help them to understand how to move forward. We're going to go on a journey today, and we're really going to talk about a couple of different things. I'll give you a little bit of information about myself, my background, give a quick introduction. We're going to talk about the definition of diversity and inclusion, and obviously there are different components or different points of interest for each of your organizations. We also have different understandings around diversity and inclusion. What does it mean to us personally? So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. We're going to talk about why focus on diversity and inclusion. Why is it even important to even talk about it in your organizations? Where do we draw the line to make sure that we are really placing a strong focus and interest when we do have that responsibility, and finding and telling your diversity and inclusion story. It's important to be able to tell a story so that you can be able to relate to those people who are responsible for providing the resources around D&I. So we're going to talk about all that. The paragraph that you see there is the same paragraph that you have in your pamphlets. So it just gives you a little summary of what we will go through today. Okay. So again, Delphia, Howze, Manager of Diversity and Inclusion at PENSKE. A lot of people ask me, okay, well, how did you get into this D&I thing? I'm going to be honest with you. When I was in college, I had no idea of what it meant, what it would mean, or had no interest in it. But as I graduated, my first job, my first responsibility was in retail. Okay, I managed, anyone familiar with Lazarus department stores? Thank you, one. Macy's actually, and I'm from Pittsburgh, Macy's actually took over this department store. It was kind of like a Boscov's. And so I ran that store, and obviously I had to manage people and I had to manage business. And, throughout that journey, as I think back, there were a lot of opportunities for me to have diversity conversations, for me to recognize the impact of diversity. I had a staff that had individuals from different backgrounds, different beliefs, different schools of thought, different ways of working, etc. And so that was something that, again, didn't have that in my view, but that was one piece of information that kind of put me on the trajectory to getting towards D&I. I then transitioned into the banking world, where I was responsible for training and development. And with this role, this is kind of where I started to get interested in diversity and inclusion. What I found is that we were bringing in a number of talented young individuals to go into our management training program. We had to train these individuals. And most of these individuals were not from areas in which our branches would be located. So for example, we had a lot of branches in urban settings, right? A lot of our students, a lot of our college graduates and trainees were not from that type of setting. So what was happening is, what I realized, as I'm training these individuals to go out and be successful into their locations, the success wasn't matching the expectation. The success of the branches was actually plummeting. And the reason I believed, just kind of based on observation and some data, was that these individuals weren't able to connect. Okay, there was a disparity between, the community and the individuals who were running the banks. And that was a big problem because obviously the bank wanted to make money and it wasn't happening. okay? So I began to kind of bark up a couple of trees and say, hey, you know what, do we need to really think about, I heard about D&I, do we need to think about diversity and inclusion? Do we need to think about how to train our talent to be able to be engaged with our community, find different ways? And people said, oh, no, we don't need to do that. We'll be fine. Just get rid of them. Find somebody else, right? That's not the answer, right? We need to be able to find it. So I continued to bark. Finally, the president of the company said, you know what, Delphia, if it's that important to you, do something about it. What do you do with that, right? I had no background, no experience, no knowledge around diversity and inclusion. But I was given this opportunity to figure something out. As a result, I developed a training program, a curriculum, a center of excellence around D&I for the organization, and it worked well. I was then called into the world of affirmative action. And with affirmative action, you know, obviously you're dealing with specific areas of focus, women and minorities, okay? Now we're transitioning into veterans, disability, all of, you know, IWD, et cetera. So we have a different focus now, but back in that time it was primarily women and minorities. And so with that focus, obviously that's another aspect or another dimension for me to add on to my, you know, knowledge base around diversity and inclusion. So I tried to tag on, bring along all of that experience that I've had in the past and align that to affirmative action. And it worked pretty well because it propelled me into the world of diversity and inclusion, where now I have a full responsibility for focusing on D&I, engaging associates, leaders, you know, internally and externally into the world of D&I and helping, you know, to find a way to leverage diversity and inclusion within the organization. It's not an easy thing. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I go to work and say, yeah, I'm very excited. I'm ready to do this. Other days I say, crap, I got to go and talk about this stuff again to people who I'm not sure they care about it, you know, so it's not an easy thing. You know, I realize that it's hard work, but even more importantly, it's heart work. Because you know what? People are really dealing with their emotions, their baggage, their values, etc. And who are we to try to change any of that for them, right? And so you take that and put it into a work setting where the focus is money, growth, sustainability, etc., and it becomes this back burner type of issue. So I'm going to hopefully give you some nuggets to help you to begin to have the discussion so that it's not a back burner issue, it truly is a front burner issue, okay? Not that I cook at all, because I don't. So here's a question. This is going to be an interactive session. You know, I'm not going to talk the whole time. You know, the more, I'm a firm believer that when you engage a group and when you guys participate, you learn from each other. You learn very minimal from the individual that's standing in front of you. So, you know, feel free to speak up, ask questions as we go along. But I do want to ask you, and I'm going to take this back a little bit because I showed you something that I shouldn't have. What does diversity mean to you? When you hear that word diversity, what does it mean to you? Just personally. Anybody?
Having a mixture.
It means a mixture, okay? What else?
Differences.
Differences. What else? Backgrounds. Good. What else? What about over here? This side is busy. Cultures. 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 Good. Give me one more.
Age.
Age. Perfect. So all of those different things, diversity is, you know, you all came up with something very different in terms of what it means, and the first thing that comes to mind. What if I say inclusion? What does inclusion mean? Ooh, I stumped you.
Acceptance.
Acceptance.
Bringing people together.
Bringing people together.
Everyone engaged.
Everyone engaged. So essentially, and I'm going to share with you right here, this, a lot of the things that you said are included in what we at Penske use as our mixture for combining diversity and inclusion and setting the foundation. We refer to diversity as the mixture of differences and similarities and related tensions, complexities that exist among the element of any mixture. Now this is actually taken from Dr. Roosevelt Thomas. This isn't something that we came up with, but we love this definition because it is fantastic. It speaks about diversity and the differences, but what's even more important it speaks about the similarities, right? If we talk about diversity only being different, a lot of times when we think about differences, negative connotations come along, right? If we include the word similarities and make sure that people understand that, you know what, it's how we're alike as much as how we're different, that's a very important factor. Inclusion. We refer to it as the achievement of a work environment in which all individuals are treated fairly, respectfully, and have equal access to opportunities and resources and can contribute fully to the organization's success. Very similar to what you said. Diversity and inclusion in our world, in the world of Penske and in my brain, are not two separate things. They have to go hand in hand. They must be co-joined. Diversity without inclusion is simply going to cause people to generally think about, again, those separated points. But when you bring inclusion into it, it's about how do you get that wonderful, beautiful mix to work together and to be effective, okay? And so here what you see in the middle of the screen here is the dimensions of diversity. And this is something that we use to help our associates to understand that, you know what, there is so much more to the elements of diversity than just what we see. In the middle circle here, what you see are 6 categories: age, gender, mental and physical characteristics, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. You see those 6 characteristics, and the reality is whenever you meet someone, you're basing your judgments, and we all have judgments and biases, but we're basing our judgments off of those first 6 categories. First 30 seconds, we form an impression off of 6 characteristics. Seems a little unfair, right? So the reality is when we think about the secondary part, the secondary dimensions, which are very extremely vast, and this only, you know, touches the tip of the iceberg. But those secondary dimensions, when we can get beyond the first dimensions and begin to ask questions, begin to engage, begin to appreciate, begin to value people, this is through the secondary dimensions. And that gives us an opportunity to truly be able to create an inclusive culture where we value all of the dimensions of diversity. We value everything that our associates bring to the table for the greater productivity within our overall organization. Does that make sense to you? So that's what we use to help people to say, you know what, it's more than just race and gender. Because unfortunately, a lot of people think that diversity is still just about race and gender. It's so much more. It's so much broader, okay? So, you know, we have this, you know, we take it even further, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we use this as a communication piece to be able to say, okay, all of this diversity that we have is a great opportunity to help us to get from the point of judging associates, judging individuals, judging our customers, judging our potential, to truly valuing the differences that are within our environment to leverage them towards productivity. So that's just kind of a visual communication that we use to help our associates to understand that we have to get from the bottom rung of this ladder of automatically judging people to truly being able to value them for the talents that they bring together, and then ultimately being able to leverage them towards the success of our organization. So a lot of times we have a challenge with regard to being able to communicate, and I say we just kind of as a global perspective, being able to communicate, okay, why do we need to talk about diversity and inclusion in the organization? Why is it important? Why do we need to talk? Why do we need to bring it up? How many of you have heard comments like this? Diversity, you know what, it's important, but I don't know we have time to focus on it right now. We have business to focus on, right? How about diversity and inclusion? You know what, we're a very inclusive company. However, we don't have women in senior leader positions, women or minorities, or any other dimension. Everyone looks the same at the top, right? Oh, you know what, I don't exclude people. They just really don't fit in to our organization. They're really not a good mix. These are things that I've heard constantly from leaders in organizations, from my peers, from you know, inside of the organization, outside of the organization, et cetera. And you know, it's problematic in the sense that we have not provided, and I'm going to say, reference that as diversity practitioners, have not provided a resource or a way for people to truly understand the benefits of diversity and inclusion, okay? We haven't set the stage and we haven't told the story around what this means. So, you know, we really have an opportunity to begin to answer some of those questions that are in everyone's mind in terms of, okay, why do we really need to think about it? Why do we really need to focus on this? And I'm going to give you some information that will help you to answer that question. If you think about what's occurred in our society, and I'm just going to go U.S. based, okay? How many of you are in global companies? Okay. We're global as well, but we're going to focus here just U.S. based. But if you think about what happened with our country, 1964. What was 1964? Can anyone give me an indication of what was the big thing in 1964? Civil Rights Act, right? Civil Rights Act came along, and you know, there was obviously a lot of baggage before that, a lot of challenges in our society before that. But civil rights came along, and out of that came a lot of different rules, regulations, thought process, etc. Affirmative action was born during this time period. So when this thought process came about, and when Title VII was codified, you have organizations with a very insightful thought process. They want to be compliant, some of them, right? Some of them wanted to be compliant. Some were kind of like, okay, well, we'll do it just because. But not many companies had bought in to what this meant and what the true intent was for affirmative action. But the focus was changing the workplace mixture. And this is a lot of information on the screen, so I'll kind of work through it. But changing the workplace mixture. The drivers were legal compliance. It wasn't a business imperative to really focus on this. Companies that focused on affirmative action focused on it because they had to, and most begrudgingly, right? They weren't really excited about it. The emphasis was to increase representation through equitable hiring practices, and the expected results were obviously to increase representation, open the doors, and then the strategy was workforce analysis and hiring practices. Strictly compliant, strictly focused on, okay, let's adhere to the expectations of the government. Basically, just opening the doors, right? You open the door, but you invite people in, and you don't offer them any water in your house. How rude is that, right? You offer them nothing to drink. So you have to give them the opportunity. So we move forward. Up to 1985 is when we began to see changes. No new rules, no new regulations, but we began to see some changes in terms of understanding that mix that is now in the workplace that we have to deal with. That we can't just fire people just because. That we have now minorities, women in our workplace, and some really are not happy, right? They're not happy, and guess what? Because of that, we're not being as productive as we possibly can. So there was a little bit of a shift in focus in terms of identifying differences within the workplace. And remember, differences in the sense that, you know what, we weren't looking at the similarities, but we were noticing that, okay, women were over here, minorities were over there, this group was there. There was not a combined effort within the organization. So the drivers then became enhancing working relationships. How do we take all of these different groups that are now within our workplace and create bridges so that they're effectively working together? The emphasis was recognizing all the ways that we were different, and I have similar, but that wasn't always the case, because it really became an issue of, you know, how do we focus on this one particular group? Expected results were to have a respectful relationships in the workplace, and then the strategy was to increase awareness, and mainly through education and communication. We really focused on how do we train people to like each other. Sensitivity training, how many of you have heard of that? How many of you love sensitivity training? How impactful is sensitivity training? I see no, nothing, right? The reality is sensitivity training had a great intent, right? To really help people to understand those differences. But what happened with that is many people went to sensitivity training one day and they weren't sensitive when they left, you know, when they went back to their offices the next day, right? And so it really wasn't effective. So we're going to move forward. Now we're into about 2005 is when we began to see another change. Again, no new rules or regulations, but a different mindset, because we recognize that, you know, we were having some challenges. We know that there are differences. We know that there's this separation of diversity within our organization, separation of mixes. But how do we get these mixes to work together to be productive within our organization? And so what we found is that many companies started to transition to to the thought process of diversity and inclusion, okay? It wasn't just about understanding differences around that diversity. So it became an opportunity and a focus for organizations to focus on creating an inclusive environment for all associates, okay? And very similar to what you all alluded to and stated earlier today. But the drivers were implementing a strategic plan, okay, for strategic gain. Companies are now beginning to look for, okay, what's the ROI for this whole diversity and inclusion thing? Then the emphasis is achieving the full workforce potential, okay? How do we bring out the best in all of these different groups? How do we leverage the diversity within our organization? And the competitive advantage. You know what? If I have a diverse organization, I can, probably get better talent because I'm looking at a broader pool, so that our organization can be more innovative, et cetera. And then the strategy is consistent practices to foster diversity and inclusion. It's no longer just about compliance. It's no longer just about training, but it's about the practices that our companies are employing to help create an inclusive environment so that we can ensure that we're getting the most productive associates working on our team so that our company is ultimately productive. So with that, the interesting thing about this shift is that we as a society and as many companies have made this shift naturally. But through language, we're still talking the same language as we were saying back in 1964. We haven't shifted our language to help people to understand the story around diversity and inclusion. So we definitely have an opportunity to help create the story, to create our business case in terms of why, at this point, it's important to focus on diversity and inclusion to leverage towards productivity. Here's your business case, right? Here's your business case in terms of how do we focus on D&I to create a sustainable business, okay? To ensure sustainability in our businesses. Forbes magazine has noted several times, many times, throughout the last 10, 15 years, the 5 most common business factors for any organization to maintain sustainability. And you have them on the left-hand side here: your workforce, your workplace, your marketplace, your suppliers, and your community. These are the 5 factors that will help to ensure that, you're getting to the right people, you're moving to the right industries, you're creating the right product, you're seen as a viable resource within the business world, et cetera. So you have these 5 areas. And the reality, if you think about diversity and inclusion and ensuring that they're aligned to each of these 5 areas of focus, there's no way that you cannot have a sustainable business. So with regard to your workforce, if you are ensuring that you are focusing on diversity and inclusion, you're looking for diverse talent, you're including that diverse talent within your organization, it's a part of your practice, your recruiting structure, then you definitely, without a doubt, are going to get opportunities for fresh thinking, right? Innovative solutions to business problems. There's no doubt that you're not going to get, if you continue to go to Harvard for your talent, you're going to get that school of thought consistently. But if you branch your recruiting efforts from one resource to other schools that have different schools of thought, you're going to bring those schools of thought in. And when they work together collaboratively, you're going to get to that innovative solution piece. Your workplace, an inclusive environment. If you think about how are you including those mixtures in your organization, that's going to lead to an opportunity for you to be an excellent resource within your organization. Improve performance, associate engagement, and retention. Because when there's an inclusive environment, people are more willing to bring themselves to the table and be a part of the mixture and help the organization to be successful. Your marketplace, if there's a level of customer satisfaction, but you have to understand who your customers are, how you're reaching them, and how you can value them. The largest demographic that has the greatest spend right now, who knows what it is? Millennials. That's maybe 2 steps below. Close.
Hispanics.
Say again?
Hispanics.
Hispanics.
Women.
Women were. LGBT. That community has the largest spending power right now, today, this very second. right? And how many companies are taking an active approach to market to that group, that demographic group? Not very many. How many of you remember the, what commercial was that? I think it was Coors, K-N-O-O-R-R-S, I think. And they did a commercial where they had 2 families where it was mommy, mommy, and baby, and daddy, daddy, and baby, right? The public didn't like that and had to pull it, right? But guess what? They missed out on a whole fantastic market to bring in revenue. And so they actually took a stance and said, you know what? We're going forward. We're going to include this in our marketing campaign. And guess what? Their sales went up.
So that is the fastest growing.
I'm sorry?
You said that's the fastest growing?
That has the greatest spend. The greatest spend. Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fastest growing is what you said. I think you said Latina or Hispanic. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So where are your dollars coming from? You really need to consider that as a demographic group for reaching out to. Yeah. And then let's see, your marketplace. I think, oh, sorry, we talked about that. Your suppliers, ensuring that there's a mutually beneficial partnership. Again, dedication to excellence, improved productivity, quality and savings for your organization. And then within the community, positive reputation in all communities, right? I'm going to share something with you that hopefully doesn't go anywhere, right? In our organization in PENSKE, our headquarters is right here in Green Hills, but we're across the country. We didn't have the best reputation in certain communities right here in our area, right? Because the thought process was, oh, you know what? They don't value us. They don't value our opinion. And I will say it's the Hispanic community, right? So we had an opportunity to begin to reach out, build relationships, and demonstrate a level of commitment towards that community. And I tell you what, the thought process has changed and has shifted. So now we have an opportunity for enhancing our services within the community. We have an opportunity to ensure that we can enter into new markets. We did a study with the Hispanic community as well, okay, on a global basis. And it really showed that we were missing an opportunity with that group of individuals. So you really have to take a look. Your business case is really, how do you align diversity and inclusion to those core areas of focus that are going to help your business to grow and be sustainable? Does that make sense? Okay. So how are you going to do that? I'm going to give you a three-step process here, and how you can do that, and how you can begin to move the needle a little bit. So you want to identify the mix. How many of you do a demographic look at your associates within your organizations? Very important, very important. Know who is in the mix, who is in your company, and even more importantly, where are they within your company? Do you have your greatest representation of minorities, women, IWD, you know, all of the groups of diversity, let's say, within lower ranks within your organization, or are they mixed throughout? Are they included throughout the organization? So you need to know where they are. It's also important to know, how did they get there, right? How did these individuals get into the organization and grow within the organization? Because you can use that as a benchmark to figure out, how can you attract more, right? How can you attract greater diversity? And how long do they stay? This is a big one. If I walk in, you know, I use the analogy of walking into someone's house and not being offered any water. If I walk into someone's house and, you know, I don't feel welcome, what do? I walk out, right? I leave. I don't want to be there because I'm not comfortable, right? I can't be myself, you know? So I'm going to walk right out of the door. It's the same for your associates. If you welcome people into your organization, you open the door, so to speak, and you don't take the time to keep them there, welcome them, make them feel included, then they're not going to stay very long. And so you have to really gauge that. And if you see kind of this exodus process, you got to figure out why it's there, where it's coming from, and how you can help that. So that's the first step. You want to identify the mix that you have within your organization. Any questions on that? Good? All right. So the next thing you want to do is you want to identify your company goals. There's nothing worse than having a diversity thought process and just have it there kind of lingering, right? It's not attached to anything. So you have to take the time to identify what are the top objectives. Now, many companies have 3, 4, 5, 6 objectives, you know, for the year. Some do a 3-year strategy, some don't. But if you take the opportunity to figure out what are the top objectives for your organization, you can begin to align, okay? So figure out what they are, know how they were determined. Are they determined purely based off of revenue, or are they determined based off of, you know, a thought process of one leader? You have to really figure that out. How are they determined? Are they constant? Is it a year-over-year thought process? Okay, or does it change? Is it consistent? Is it every 6 months? You need to understand that. You need to know how and why the direction would change. So what would cause the goal of your organization to shift? Would it be market trends? Would it be the industry? Would it be the economy? You need to really figure that out. And then lastly, who determines those goals? So once you have step 1 and 2 figured out, you know the mix and you know the goal of your organization, you can then move to being able to tell your story. And telling your story gives you the opportunity to really paint a picture for your business case, to create that foundation for your business case to move forward with regard to D&I and get people on board, and in addition to answer those questions that we had in terms of why should we focus on it? Why is it important? We've been a successful company. We don't need to deal with it today. We can talk about it tomorrow or next year or 10 years down the line. So tell the story. How can the mix that you've identified help to reach these specific goals that you know are important to the organization? And what is the benefit of nurturing that mix? Not just having it, but actually nurturing that mix of individuals that you have so that you can have a productive company, okay? So that's a 3-step process. We're going to do an exercise. You guys up for an exercise? All right, so I gave each of you an index card. Does everyone have a pen? All right.
Of course I don't.
And thank you so much. And so before I give you your task or your responsibility, I do want to ask, I know I went through this very quickly and I pulled certain pieces out. Any questions about this, and does it make sense to you? Okay, all right. So here's what we're going to do in our group exercise. We will just split you right down the middle, and I know it's kind of uneven, but that's okay. I'm going to ask you to create your own business case. And you now work for a company, I don't know, Exit, because you work for the Exit company, and that's the company that you work for. And so you have a responsibility to kind of share the story of why diversity and inclusion is important and what the benefit is. The first thing that I want you to do is, on that index card, I want you to think about yourself, all right? Think about yourself, and I want you to think about defining characteristics of you, okay? And I want you to pick out one defining characteristic of yourself, okay? And I want you to draw it on your index card, a defining characteristic. I got you thinking, what is that? How would you define yourself, and how would you draw it? I know. I see the bubbles above your head, and they say, "Oh crap!" Right? Your defining characteristic. For example, you might consider yourself to be a strong individual. You might draw a lion, or a what is it? A barbell, dumbbell? Wait. So draw your defining characteristic. Draw a picture of that. All right. Now what I'm going to have you do is you're going to have to move a little bit because you're going to interact with one another. I'm going to ask you to kind of, so this group, you guys will obviously be together and we'll kind of pull you guys together here. You're going to come together and share your defining characteristic because this represents the diversity of your part of the company exit, right? This is the diversity of company exit. And I want you to share your defining characteristics with each other. Then together, this is step 3, together, you are going to create your business story, your business case, your story for how this diversity that has come together in company exit can benefit the company towards the goal of entering new markets. We'll pick that. Entering a new market, that's your company goal. How does the diversity that has naturally come together within company exit find a way to benefit the company goal to enter into new markets? Okay, does that make sense? Okay, all right. So, you guys are together? You guys are together? All right, and you know what? We will not take any points away for creativity or drawing, you know? My picture would be a stick figure. I'm sorry?
Do you need anything right now?
No, no, thanks.
I'm a crazy working mom right now.
Oh, I've got to see this one. Oh, I like that.
That's how I feel right now today. I'm a communicator. Not an artist.
I love it. I love it.
I tried to have strong with big biceps, big biceps. And then I'm positive, so that's sunshine.
Okay.
Towards other people, so I drew hearts.
Fantastic. Look at that, 2 filing cabinets. Awesome.
I am a father and husband, first of all. So that's my
That's great. That's great.
Like a caregiver.
All right. So we have a nice mix of diversity, right? We have different values, different points of need, necessity, and importance for each person here. What now you're going to do is think about your business case. You're an organization, of exit organization, entering into a brand new market that wants to enter into a brand new market, that wants to, expand into new markets. How do you take all of this wonderful diversity and create a story of why this diversity is important? Why do you need to nurture, well, I don't have it up there now, why do you need to nurture all of this towards the productivity of the organization and help that goal? Okay?
So for my aspect, what I think of immediately is, the flexibility of diverse groups. So whether it's
How you guys doing?
we have a good
You're a diverse group? Yeah?
Drivers, organized, compassionate.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Some similarities, but
Yeah, I saw 2 filing cabinets here, right? Great. So how are you going to take all of that beauty, all of that wonderful diversity, that wonderful mix, okay, that represents your company, exit, all right, towards the goal of entering new markets? What is the point that will help you with your business case, with your story as to why this is important? Why do you need to nurture it? Why do you need to ensure that you have this in your organization so that this goal could be realized?
and with technology, you can work from home, you can do certain things.
It makes you think. It makes you think.
in terms of a mission statement or a slogan or
You can do that. We'll take that.
Best people.
That's
That
fine.
might be the best.
That's a way to do it. Create a mission statement.
But they can't
I could give you the answers, but that wouldn't be.
Well, there's some objectives that would get us to reach the goal and then figure out which characteristics would best carry them out.
That's great. How,
For example, our good listener could go out and do a market survey with
I'm gonna
customers
play
and
the
see
devil's
what they're really
advocate.
looking
So
for.
why is that person?
There you go.
yourself, maybe yourself,
that's it.
important to the
You guys are moving.
organization? So we have to sell it.
right.
Yeah. I can attest to that.
Like a power tractor.
Specific skill set. I need somebody to be flexible. I need to be flexible with that person.
Or actions, strategic action, what we're gonna do is like, that's a good example. Here's a listener's
Mediation.
You're into the marketplace to see
All
where
kinds of skills.
needs are and what opportunities are. Organized, you guys do a workshop, we're more than happy to make it.
Schedules,
Well, we could,
whatever.
take the data that our listener finds and put it into
But I mean,
a,
all those life skills you bring to the table. So,
new product.
resume, that's all part of it as well. Because someone asked me one time, how do I deal with you? And I said, well,
Such
I
stick
have to do
figures.
it, so. So I mean, dealing with people, dealing with children, it does bring something to the table.
Sure.
Yeah, and I also think like with, right into what,
that our outgoing person
lines like being faithful and loyal, I
should
think
be
of
the one
like
to,
family values, that's very important, and how
lead
that can be
marketing.
integrated into the company.
You've got sales.
So-
Yeah, it depends on.
Now become the VP of sales. For exit.
Knowledge of products or services.
And your new employee
So
ID.
let's exit. Place that we go to.
No, that's gonna stick with you for a while.
That compassion can be brought to bear to assist with, the services, if you're doing customer service.
Well, I guess the hardworking and the driven can actually make the new product.
We're on the line,
What's
apparently.
important to
Get the bill.
it increases that productivity because you work hard, I think because you're buying into something that they value that's important to you.
And move from the wage and hour law presentation. If I work over 40 hours a week, I get something. I knew you knew.
Not gonna happen.
We just come from the FMLA presentation, the compassionate caregiving part of the people who are working too hard.
That's excellent.
Because I have a passion for what I
Well,
do.
we're
I'm
on-site
thinking
medical
get the
care.
work
I'm
done.
The welcoming option, could really handle like suppliers and vendors, open to hearing ideas and, taking all that in and, kind of making some sense of it, turning it over to our organizers who can make some sense of it to supply our production activities.
A lot
You
more,
mentioned how
two-family work.
large the spending
That's where
power
the flexibility comes
LGBT
into
community
gaining
is true.
diversity.
And LGBT consumers
I don't
tend
think you
to
can attract the top talent.
do business with
and have that
companies, buy
flexibility.
products or services from companies that they know are open to
I think we have to do more of those. I mean, that's
LGBT
part of it.
employees
When
and
you're talking about-
suppliers.
That's more of like
what
attracting
have you.
people to
Yeah.
your organization,
That's-
but part of
yeah.
that is how
There
those
was
people
an
once
initiative
attracted,
started
how
last year in
and how
Berks
we-
County by the
those
Business
differences
Bureau.
between people
Businesses could
actually
sign a
assist in
pledge
selling
to
products
be
or selling
inclusive,
services.
and they
Well,
were
I
given a
think-
decal they could put
Again,
on their
consumer changes.
establishment to let
You know,
business
just focus on women.
know that they
Their
were
buying power is,
LGBT inclusive.
going up.
I don't know if that's something that would specifically
Buying more
fit
units,
into
more cars, more homes,
our
more
mission
types of
or
things. So
marketing plan.
that's what you
Mhm.
attract.
Something that businesses
I think
are
that's where
actively
We
pursuing.
need to
That's
check
great.
our
Going
skills
out, they're
Yeah.
trying to
and
attract that
to
particular
drive our
market segment.
exit company.
Nice.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's whether to drive a product or develop a new product.
Give you about another minute and a half to finish up.
You know, you need that same process.
Right? charge of five.
Driving it, yeah.
Five of those would be women.
So we have bubbles and rocket beans, that's what we're saying.
It's a song.
It is, exactly.
It could go.
And it affects the bottom line by retaining the employees who don't have the material.
All right, make sure that you have someone who's willing to speak up for for your company.
Now you're touching.
That's good.
You're in.
Someone trying to get in.
Not really.
All right. Let's talk about this. Does everyone have their thought process around exit company and all of the diversity and how it can help with your opportunity to get to the new market or new markets? Which group would like to go first and share with us their story?
They would.
You're so kind.
He's very welcoming.
Very inclusive, right?
To go first.
Are you okay?
Do you?
I guess I'll do it, since I put down that I communicate.
Ah.
That was my mistake. We had parents here, crazy mom, she said.
Uh-huh.
A parent, we have someone who focuses on the bottom line. We have a person who's compassionate, we have a person who's strong, we have a person who's a faithful, loyal employee, and we bring all that together. And we looked at this from two different aspects. First of all, how that inclusion can draw more people into the company as far as hiring employees and being flexible in what we can offer to employees, and that we can offer employees flexible work time. We understand about parents needing to have time off and folks needing to have time off for other reasons as well. But at the same time, we can use this combination to drive looking at new markets, and everyone is bringing their specific skills to bear. For example, we have parents who, no matter what their resume says, they're bringing skills such as leadership qualities,
Yep.
just because they're parents, or mediation skills, or
Negotiation.
negotiation skills. To the table. We have people with strength and with compassion, so depending on whether we're looking at a product line or a service line, different areas of those skills may be more important or not. So that's pretty much what it is.
That's fantastic. So nice job. Give her a round of applause, please, because that was very nice. The idea is you took all of this wonderfulness and pulled it together towards an effort to support the goal of getting into new markets. If you look at, the work-life balance, is that like a real thing? Does anyone actually have that? I don't know. But if you begin to consider that and figure out how that will help, that's your story. All of this is your story. So that was a great synopsis and summary of how you guys pulled that together. Thank you very much.
We have salespeople here who can say that.
Okay, all right.
Okay, yeah, she wrote it down.
Yeah, we took a very similar approach to what their group did. We went around and identified the characteristics.
What do you have over here? Some of them just...
Listener, 2 organized individuals, caregiver, welcoming, hardworking, driven, compassionate, and outgoing and fun.
Okay, great.
So then we decided, we were looking at our goal of getting into the new market. We identified the action steps that our team would have to take to do that. And then we identified which people with which characteristics would be best to carry out those action steps. So for example, we decided that our good listener would be the one to go out into the marketplace and to identify what the customers are looking for in new products. The organized would put that data into a plan for product development. Our hardworking, welcoming person would manage the supply chain and get the vendors and suppliers on board for the needs. The hardworking would make the new product. The caregiver would handle the issues like FMLA for the employees. The compassionate person would do community relations and getting out to all the different groups within the community, like the, all the diversity that's out there, and reach out to them. And let's see what else we have here. Our driven would take care of the product launch, and our outgoing and fun would take it to the market and handle sales.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you very much. Give them a round of applause. Very nicely pulled together. So the idea around this is to take all of the diversity and leverage it towards productivity of your organization based on the goals that have been identified. You have to support the goals. If you're not speaking to the goals, if you're not speaking the language, if you're still speaking the language of 1964 in that transition, you're not going to be able to sell your business case. You're not going to be able to get people on board, and you're not going to move further with your D&I efforts. So you have to start there. Speak the language, be able to tell your story in relation to the diversity that you have, the mix that you have within your organization, and how it can benefit the goal, how it can benefit the efforts of your organization. One additional important thing that I want to share with you, and our time is almost up, but I think we're good, is that culture, right? And no matter what you do, no matter what strategy you have, no matter what direction you plan on going, you have got to also know your company's culture. Because if your company's culture is not receptive to, hearing the information, you have to find a way around it. So, how many of you know this fella? He says, what? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. You have to know the culture, or else everything that you do will get eaten up and thrown out somehow, right? So you've got to be aware of the culture that you have. I think I have another. You have to be aware of the culture that you have. So in telling your story, you have to be knowledgeable in terms of who your audience is, okay? So what you have here, I got a signal, but again, this is a very, very consolidated effort to try to give you a little piece of something around D&I. And believe me, the world of D&I is so much larger than, what we had time to discuss. But hopefully, you got something out of it, and you can take it back to your organizations and kind of hone it, add to it, change it, what have you. If you have questions at all in any way, shape, or form, you're more than welcome to, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to talk to any of you if I can help you. So with that, I think I'm finished. Yes? Okay.